All right, well, good morning on this cold, windy, rainy, and as my wife just pointed out, it's now snowing in Lincoln. We went from 70 degrees to snow to rain. It's beautiful weather. So, it's Nebraska. If you don't like it, wait 5 minutes and you'll see something different. So, again, as I've told the people here in class with me that we've extended this a little bit. So, a couple of things we want to do, and we'll look at some of these assignments. So, for 8, I'm going to launch it here really quickly, or, well, as quickly as it wants to launch here. Launch. Well, all right, hang on a second. All right, so 4-8 is going to ask us to do something interesting. So 4.8 says we want to take a file and we want to copy from and we want to output it to another file. So we're taking one text file and we're outputting it to another file. So in this case, they gave us a one-line text file. Well, that's interesting, but I think at some point we're going to want something a little bigger. So we're going to look and show you how we can upload a file in here. So I'm going to just go to a blank window, and I'm going to find just some kind of text file that I can use. Maybe we have, or maybe we do a sample text file. There we go. There's a bunch of junk in here. So here we have some sample. So I'm going to download this so it's on my computer. Make sure it's not. All right, so that's got a ton of text in it. So it doesn't necessarily need to mean anything, but I'm going to grab a huge bunch of text. And I'm going to select it all and copy it, and I'm going to store it inside of I'm going to open up Notepad, and then I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save it in the same spot where I'm going to put all my other documents here. So, in Documents, I'm going to make this a little bigger so I can see around it. So I'm going to store this inside of my Python files, and I'm going to call it sample.txt. And it's just for me to use for some of these programs that we're going to look at. So, however you get a bunch of sample text and in a Notepad file, and like I said, I saved it in the same spot. Now, I can't see it directly from here, but I can make it appear. So notice if I click on New File, I can create or upload a file. So if I select Upload, and I go back to my Documents, Python files, and my sample text, now I've uploaded that into this Cengage environment for me. Now, I'd like to tell you that it's every time you now open one of these Cengages, it's going to be there, but it's not hard to put it in there. So that gives me a little more text than simply saying this is sample text, just to prove that this will work with a little larger files. So this is the file we're going to create. This is what we're copying from, one of these or the other. And then here's where I have to be a little careful is what we're going to copy to. So we can overwrite our own file, and that's a danger we have inside of this Cengage environment. So, all right. So hopefully everybody's got a chunk of text. We'll use it more on the next couple of assignments, but I think it's kind of interesting to do that, just so you have a little more proof of the pudding, I guess, would be the way I'd look at it. All right. So I'm going to look over here at copy file. It says put your code here. All right. First thing always, I'm going to put my name in there. just that. And I'm going to start a section, so I'm going to break this into sections that I know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to put input file names in a section. I know that I'm going to have to open the read file and I know I need to open an output file and write text. So this just helps me keep track of where I'm at, putting these in kind of like little indents to let me know what's going on. So input the file names. Well, it gives us a piece here, so I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to copy that so it looks the same and it saves me a little bit of typing. So I'm going to have to ask my user for a couple of different file names. So my file I'm taking it from, so we could call it in. I'm going to create an input. Enter, oh no, I forgot. I had that pasted, ready to go. Enter the file name. Okay. So in is going to be whatever file name we type in. Well, if I have one that's in, I probably am going to have one that's out. Equals input. And then I can copy this line right here again. Now, at this stage in the game, we're getting an input file and an output file. There is a danger here. Are we validating these file names or anything else? We're just taking what you give us. And so we'll hope it all works out. But what we would probably do in a little more refined program, so if we took this and started refining it, is we would start having where we could open up certain file names. We could make sure that they had the right extensions. But right now, all we're going to do is get a file name from a user. The first step in here, then, we're going to have to open that read file. Okay. So we have to name it something. So we have another variable name that we're going to have to use where we're going to store this temporarily. So I'm just going to call it input file, just so I remember which one it is. And we're going to open. Now, because we've already asked for a name up here, I guess you can't see me pointing at the screen, but we've asked for a name of that file, we don't have to put it in manually. We just put in the name of our variable. And this time, we're going to open this file only as a read. So we're going to put it in as an R, because that's all we're going to do is read that file. So our file is now open. We could now, because what we're really wanting to do is copy our text from one file to another file. So I'm going to just call it text. So here's where we use that dotted notation. So I'm going to use input file dot read because this file is open. Great. Now, our book has told you don't have to do it. I think it's best practice. So I like to close the file that we're on. So input file dot close, just as a practice, so that we've opened it, we've closed it, and we don't have any pointers hanging open to it. So what we could do is we could see if that actually works. Okay, sorry. So we can see what happens. So here we have a program. We're going to put in file names, and we're going to say we're going to output it. So I'm going to move this over a little bit, and I'm going to run it. Probably find some hideous typing error in my, yep, I'm sure I did. Line 5, what did I do? Oh, it doesn't like the word in. Okay, hang on. I'm going to change that. It didn't like in, which must have been a keyword. I was trying to make it nice and short. So we'll change it to in file and see if that fixes it. So, okay. Enter the input file name. Well, I have a couple of them to choose from here. Copy from .text or our sample text, because we've uploaded them both. And because of the first time, I'm going to try copy from .txt. And remember, I have to copy it exactly, and we'll show you why here in just a second. And the output file, I'm just going to call out.txt. All right, and I'm going to hit enter. Why did it not write anything out there? So let me try it again. Let's try the larger file. Enter the input file, sample.txt, and it works. So notice it printed everything out there. So why did this one not work? Well, the most likely reason is I typed something wrong when I put that name in. So copy from text. So let me try it again. Hang on. It'd be helpful if I started with the right one. Okay, so copy from .txt, and there it actually displays it. So I want to try one more thing just to check a hunch I have. So enter the input file. So it is case sensitive also. So copy from with a lowercase is different, and when it happens I get this error. And so we're going to work on showing you some ways to hide those errors, but if it doesn't have a file name, it's going to go, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to stop my program, and we're all done for the day. All right. So we know that this works as long as we're able to type the right name. I don't really need that print in here any longer. It worked as a great little test, but I'm just going to comment it out. And now we don't see that anymore. So open an output file and write the text. Okay. So now we have to create our output file. So if we did input file, let's just do out file. And we're going to say open. And what do we call it? Out. And in this case, we're going to write, because we want to put that in a brand new file. And the write command has a really handy thing of, if you put in a name in there and write to it, that file doesn't exist, it creates it all at the same time. So we're going to write it out. We need to so that dot notation, we're going to use the write command, and we're going to write text. And then we're going to close this file. And again, you can sometimes get away without doing that, but this is kind of a best practice. So we're going to write that file and see if it actually appears. So let's run it and see what happens. Input file name is, I'm just going to use the sample.txt. Doesn't really hopefully matter. The output file name, I'm going to call working.txt. And notice up here, all of a sudden we have working.txt appeared. Yeah. And look at that. So this program seems to work. We haven't tried it against the grader yet, but I'm going to try something here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start it again. The input file name is copy from .txt. And I'm going to call it the same thing, working.txt, and I want to see what happens. Hang on, what did I do there? Enter the input file name. So it did not write over the top like I thought it would. Interesting. Okay. I thought it would write over the top with our one line. Interesting. All right. So it didn't do what I thought it would do, but that may be a limitation of being inside of this Cengage environment. All right. So I want to try this then and see what happens if we try to hit the grading button. So I'm going to run my checks. Yay! It seems like we managed to succeed at that. So a short little program like this sounds like, hey, what would I ever do that for? But if you think about this in terms of automation, maybe you need to move things around on a regular basis, or you're creating a backup, or whatever odd structure you're doing, the ability to manipulate files, and we're not limited to text files. We can change and write those to any kind of file. So we could open all kinds of things and manipulate them around. So we could actually even create, see if I can do this without messing it up. So if I start this, input file name, what do we call that? Copy file.py. Copy file.py. Well, and we know that Python files are really just a text file. So we could actually create a copy then of our own files, and hopefully it just did that. So you can do all different kinds of things. Python files are no different. They're just a text file. So that looks like a pretty simple way we can maneuver files. Now, again, it's missing any kind of validation, any checks, any error conditions, but it does the job we're looking at to start with on that one. All right, let's move to something a little more challenging, and let's take a look at 4.9. And it opens so slowly. All right. So this one says we're going to write a program called number lines. Okay. It's going to prompt the user for the names of two files. Oh, okay. I think I can figure out a way to do that. Got that part down. And then it copies the lines of text from the input file to the output file, but it adds a number to each line as it goes through there. Okay. The number or the line number should be right justified in 4 columns so that the format of a line in the output file looks like this. Okay. So added a little more here. Says, oh, we have to format this. We have to put it together. So, a couple of things we need to look at really quickly. The first part of this is going to look very, very similar to what we've already done. And in fact, if you wanted to go back, you could actually take some of that and get the input and the outputs very easily. Because it's not going to necessarily change a lot. So if you had copied those, you'd be able to do that. What we have to do, though, is this ordering, and that's probably a little bit of a harder piece to do. So we need to go back in our book. We may need to find somewhere else on how to format. So let's do the pieces we know how to do really quickly. So I'm going to put in, and I know that we're going to have a input, the file name, and that's going to be really similar to what we did before. So in file equals input. I'm just typing them out real quick. And we just called it out file and in file. Enter output file name. So that part we can do pretty easily. So we need to open a couple of files. Well, luckily we have the names of them up here. So just, I think that's what we used before. So input file equals open, and then our in file. And the first one we're going to open as a read only. So we're going to open our input file as a read, and we're also going to open equals open. Now, we're going to take the out file, but in this case we're going to open this one as a write, because we're going to send it to another file, and we need to be able to write to that. Alright, so we want to add a line number to this. So we know we're going to have some kind of a loop, because we don't know how many lines are in that file. So there's a lot of different ways we can do it. We know we're going to start with 0. What I like to do is we could use a while loop, but for loops have an advantage for us here. So I'm just going to create a variable called line, doesn't do anything else, for line in, and we can actually just put that input file. So for every line inside of here, so this loop will run all the way through that input file until it reaches that end of file marker. And I want to increment that, so line number equals line number plus 1. And yes, we could do the shortcut, but my brain doesn't let me do that. Alright, here's where it gets a little tricky. We have to output that, and we need to put it back in, so every time we go through a line, we write a new line into our code. So output file, the same one we opened. So output file dot write. Now, the easy way to do this is we could write this as line number and then line, because we're reading each line in individually. So I want to see what this does first. So we haven't put any formatting in. Now, outside of this loop, so once that loop finishes, I want to close that. So what did I call it? Output file dot close. So I want to try this and see if this works first before we start talking about the formatting. So what I want to do here is I first need some text in here to work with. So I'm going to click on my plus button and I'm going to upload a file, and it happens to be I'm going to use that sample file. So the same one I did before. So just I have that sample file available. So otherwise, I don't have anything to output unless you were recursive and you used, for example, your own program, but that seems to be a bad idea. So let me come over here, and I'm going to click Run. Oh, I can't run it on the sample text. Hang on, let me try it again. All right, there we go. So enter our input file name. And so we're going to call that sample.txt. And notice I need to put another space in there. That's going to drive me crazy. So enter the sample.txt. Now, the output file we want to do something different with. So a new name. So I'm going to call it sample2.txt. And I'm going to hit the enter key. Well, line number is not defined. Probably. Hang on a second. Which word did I miss that? Line number. Did I do something silly? Line number. Somewhere I've got one of them mixed up. What line did it say? Oh, duh. There we go. Never trust my typing. Alright, we'll try that again. Sample.txt. The output file, sample2.txt. Text IO wrapper. Let me see what I've done this time. Traceback file, number lines.py, line 16. What have I done? Weird and odd. Output file dot write dot line number comma line. Why does it not like that? Hang on. Let me double check here real quick. Pause that while Alright, so I tried to cheat and shortcut before I showed you guys some formatting. So in your book, and if you want to go into Python resources, you could find format strings, Python. So there's all different kinds of formatting that we can use. So this is a newer style using this methodology, but any of those will work. So what I'm formatting it is I'm actually combining those together. So here I'm saying I'm going to put it in 4 units, and I'm running this string across. So if you want to consolidate this, so telling it that then I'm creating a single line out of both items is what we're doing here. So if you would like to just grab that. That should allow you to do something very similar. And what you end up with then, so here's my sample text. Here's my sample 2. Now, it doesn't do an individual line as we think of it. It thinks of that individual line as the way it is in that text file. So in this case, those file names, or the file has a long structured name. So then it's got some blanks. So this doesn't necessarily work the greatest for that sample text I got. Now, I could go edit it. Documents, Python files, sample. So notice that it's a long line. So if I would go in and put end of line characters in here, we could certainly make it work better for that name. So they have very long structured names in here, or lines. So, and it's just a chunk of text, so it doesn't really necessarily matter a lot. But so now if I did this, it would have more lines in there. So save. And so now if I do the same thing, go to the right item would be helpful. Right, sample. Sample.txt, sample2.txt, and so now it will have changed that a little bit so that we have more of those lines in there where I broke it up. Right. So this is just one way we can do that. We can manipulate that in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of tutorials on formatting. So this is one way we could do that. So the other way, if I just wanted to try to add it to that line number to the front, I could concatenate each line together, which is essentially what we're doing here, but a little differently. So this is one way you can do it. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ways you can do it to create that idea of putting in a number in front. There's some interesting pieces that happens with this, and we could actually see how many lines we have. If you're looking at a piece of code, so maybe I've got a bunch of Python code, this is a great way I could look at it and say, all right, I need to take this Python code here, and I want to put line numbers on it. Well, we could do that. So I could, as my source file, numberlines.py, sample3.txt, and now I took that file I had and I put line numbers on everything. Well, that might be handy to do just because I'm trying to figure out what's going on in a program or something that I've gotten screwed up. So that's not necessarily a bad thing to be able to write those out like that. And so with our file name here, it looks a little easier to see that. Now, the only danger of that is if I took this, put it in the right spot. So my sample file name is numberlines.py. And I used the same output file accidentally because we don't verify that they're different. Well, now, in most cases, I would have just broken my file because it would have put those back in there. Now, this doesn't allow me to modify it apparently quite like that, but in the real world, if we're using an idle environment or PyCharms or something, we would have just added line numbers to my code. Well, that would be a pain in the tuchie, and then we'd have to write a code to strip those back off of there. So string format, there's a lot of different ways we could do that. So I would look through the book, make sure you've got the formatting piece down. There will be some formatting on the final when we get to it, which is only 6 weeks away. We'll take a look at this one real quick. So 410, slowly. So this one says we're going to write a program that's going to ask for 2 text files, and it's going to compare the contents to see if they are the same. So this is the beginning of, maybe you're going to write a program that looks for plagiarism. So you want to compare all of our student papers. So this might be, the first step in that would be saying, all right, I'm going to take 2 files. How do I start to figure that out? So we know we're going to have to do 2 files, so we could do something very similar. So input file names. So depending on what we wanted to call them, I think I'm going to probably call them file 1 equals input. Please enter file 1. And then I'm going to do this. Chunk. I'm going to copy. And I'm going to paste it. And just change these to a 2 and a 2. Alright. So now we've got our file input. So, hey, we've got those file names. So the next step then we're going to have to do is we're going to have to open the file. So input file 1 is equal to open, and we know that it's file, what do we call it? File 1, and we want to open those as an R, just as a read. So if that works for 1, let's do this, because again, there's no sense in typing when we don't have to. And we're going to change that to file 2, and this to file 2. And so now we've opened both of our files. We've said, all right, we've got them open, they're ready to compare. I'm going to scroll down a little bit so we can take a look at what we're doing here. All right, now we need to read each line and compare. So we need a big loop. So I'm just going to put up here to start with a while loop. I'll come back and show you what we're going to do with it. And we're going to use that read line. So line 1 is equal to input, what do we call it? File 1 dot read line. So as it loops through here, it's going to read line 1, and then it's also going to read line 2. And again, just to make my typing easier so I don't have as many typos when I'm trying to talk, I'm going to change this to line 2. So each time this loop goes through, we pluck one line from each file. So we're going to compare 2 files, we're plucking 2 lines. So here's what we're going to do that's a little funky. So if line 1 is equal to, remember we have to use the double equals, so if it's blank and line 2 is also blank, so in other words both ends are empty, we're going to put a print line in there of some sort. And we're going to say, because what we're really asking is, are the outputs the same? So if they're the same, we've made it all the way through this, and we've got to the end of the file, and we've not said that there's a problem between them. Now, there are other ways to do this, but in this case, we're going to actually just break that loop. Not necessarily always the best way to do it, but in this case, it makes an easy way for me to get out of that loop. So the next piece I need to do then, I'm going to do an elif, because I want to have another condition in here. So if line 1 does not equal line 2. So we're checking to compare those lines. Then we're going to print, I believe the books wants just no. Okay. And we're also going to do a couple of other things. We want to print both lines. Print line 2, so we can see that there's a difference in them. And then we're also going to do this. We're going to break out of that loop. Now, are there a lot of other ways to do it? Yes. Here's what I'm going to do for my cheat, though, on this loop. To make it run, so while true, so while what's true? We're not even asking. So we're just saying here, while this condition is true, but we don't have any way to change that condition. So we could do some other manipulations on it, but this is one way that we can run this fairly quickly. So in this case, we're going to compare those two lines, look at them, and see if those are the same. So here's what I need to do. I'm going to make a couple of files. So I'm going to go helpful if I hit the Windows button. So Notepad, and I'm just going to type a sentence. The cow jumped over the moon. And I'm going to go save those in that same place here. So I'm going to put cow.txt. And then I'm going to change it just slightly. And I'm going to save it as another name. Save as cow2. Alright. So now I have a couple of files that I can compare really easily. And so I need to add them in here. So I'm going to upload cow. Then I'm going to upload cow2. So now I have two files I can test on. So let's see how badly I typed. This will be always as interesting. Entering file 1 is cow.txt. File 2 is cow2.txt. So we know that I changed it, so it should error out and say no. And then it actually did. All right. Well, let's check them and see if we enter a file that is similar. So I can cheat, maybe, and put in the same file name. Let's see what happens. Hey, they're the same. I'd hope so. It's the same file. But this is a great way I can compare things like code structures, because I can actually pull each line individually and I can actually compare them really, really easily. So there's a lot of different ways we could refine some basic code like this. So we could do this while loop a little differently. We could do it as a for loop. We could count the number of lines and put a loop in of that definitive size. And honestly, one of the things you could do to shortcut this is if you wanted to check those files, you could check for the length of the file or the number of lines to make sure that they're the same. So there's a lot of other ways you can do it. This just compares them one line at a time If we add a longer file, let's see, what did we call it? Sample somewhere in there. So if I want to do the same thing with sample, and I did it to cow.txt, and it's going to actually grab the first line and compare it to the first line. And so it's going to stop right there. So it would give you some indications that you could do that. So if I can do this, and I can pull one line at a time, can I make changes to each line? Yeah. What if I wanted to write, because I was a student who liked to plagiarize, but what I knew was that I could change up vowels and change up different words. So I could write this where it looks for a line in a file, and if you use the verb jump, and in the output file then it could put something different for that word jump. So you could make it where it looks for a list of words and changes them automatically to essentially make a word salad out of somebody else's document to bypass things like plagiarism filters. Not telling you to do that because you'd want to do some other tricks, but this is how easy it is with Python. Python allows us to do that pretty easily.
Could you decipher with it too?
You can decipher, you can do all different kinds of things. So these kinds of things are what I like Python for. Short little programlets, you might call it, is what I use it for. So if I want to test out some code against a website, I can do that really easily in Python. So maybe I might build a file list as a text file that's got 100,000 different passwords in it, or sample passwords. I can go in and try those. And then I can also add, so I know that people put the numbers. If you give me I tell you need a 8-character password and you need 2 numbers, everybody's going to write 6 letters. Numbers are going to be on the outside edge because we know that from human behavior. So I could set it to then add and sit there and attack it that way. So Python gives us a lot of flexibility that way because it manipulates data and text almost effortlessly. All right. So this week, come back to discussion boards. There we go. All right. So I do have a discussion board item that will be due this week. And so we will finish up the chapter and talk about this one then on Thursday. So this one should be very similar. So we created before a clock that counted up. This time you're going to count down. And you only have 3 minutes and your seconds to work with. But you're going to attach those into the discussion board. And then once everybody's done, we can all see what everybody else came up with as a method to that. So we'll give you some ideas and some hints on that. But this way you're going to create kind of a countdown egg timer.